So I've been making YouTube videos for a pretty long period of time now. It's been like 8 years or something I've been releasing content on this platform. And across my time making all these different projects, the kinds of videos I enjoy making the most are the ones that are really personal projects. Videos like the 0 minute, 0 second birth of a blank, the not playing League of Legends is terrible, and some of the League of Legends documentaries I've done. Whenever I can get really invested in a project myself, I feel like is when I'm able to do stuff really special. Not to say these videos necessarily are the best in the world or that they will necessarily connect with everyone who watches them, but I think that when I'm able to make like really cool stuff is when I care about it the most. But oftentimes, what I care about doesn't always succeed on YouTube in terms of views and whatnot. You know, not everybody cares about a League of Legends player who was good 1 year, like half a decade ago. That kind of stuff can not always do the best when it comes to views. And because I use YouTube as a way to support myself full time, I have to find other avenues of revenue. So segue, I have a Patreon. For anyone who doesn't know, I have a Patreon that has been running for quite a while, but recently I rebooted it with a number of different additional perks. I've been trying to find ways to actually give you guys rewards and various different worthwhile things for you to have. Pieces of exclusive content like a personal podcast, some updates and early video releases and whatnot. And part of that is Q&A videos. I want to do Q&A videos again. I've tried to do these in the past, but I've never actually had that many patrons, and the patrons I've had don't actually ask me a lot of questions, so I haven't really been able to do them before. But if you want to ask me a question, AMA, go, and any pledge to my Patreon, you can participate in these monthly Q&A videos I'll be doing at the end of the month. This one being our very first one, at least our very first one in a very long period of time. Here for the month of June, we have a couple of questions that I'm going to get through, and I hope you guys enjoy. First question asked by Snowish, who says, as someone who hasn't been able to play League, what are your opinions on who's the most busted character right now? In general, what are your opinions on the meta from a spectator's only point of view? This is actually kind of interesting because I've been thinking about this recently. I feel like I almost maybe romanticize League of Legends a little bit now that I can't play it and can't deal with the frustrating elements of the game. This is something you probably saw in my recent video that I put out on the main channel talking about how much I miss the game, because when you don't play League, you don't remember how frustrating it is. I kind of miss some of the frustration, like getting super invested and then either achieving a goal or feeling heartbroken that I failed. That's something that I miss retroactively, but it's interesting because I can't ever... You know, I know people are probably still complaining about the game. People are probably complaining that one character is busted or one role is overpowered, another role is useless, yada, yada, yada. I see people talk on Twitter all the time about that kind of thing, but I don't see it myself. You can't really feel that if you don't, if you don't play the game yourself, because a lot of the frustration I think in League of Legends comes from the feeling of powerlessness that you have when you're in a counter pick matchup, when you're, playing top lane and you get hard countered by something that you cannot do anything to beat, and then just sitting there in lane for 10 to 20 minutes slowly losing. That's where the frustration comes, and you don't see that at all as a spectator. From my perspective, pretty much the only interaction I've had with League of Legends is making documentaries on the history of the game and watching the current esports scene. And from my perspective, I don't see any champion that seems absurdly overpowered or someone that's incredibly broken. For the most part, I enjoy the new additions to the game, the Vigar's brother, whatever his name is, Viego. Who else is there? Lilia is someone who I think was the last champion release before I suddenly couldn't play the game anymore. So I played against her a little bit and she seemed kind of annoying, but all the new champions that have been added seem interesting and fun and dynamic. I don't feel like, from a spectator's point of view, any of them are necessarily incredibly broken. And yeah, I think the esports scene is pretty enjoyable to watch. And from what I can tell, the meta seems fine, but then again, I haven't been able to play the game. There could be some very frustrating champions that you just can't see it when you're not playing against it yourself. In our second question, Nikhil asks, have any of the League cinematics particularly caught your attention? What do you like/dislike about it? This is a very good question because it kind of segues into something that I've kind of wanted to do a video that talks about the history of League cinematics, but that's, speaking of niche, weird content, I don't know if that's something anyone would be interested in. I don't know if, rewinding the clock back to 2010, when I first started playing League of Legends, the big streamer everyone watched was HotshotGG. And I remember one specific stream Hotshot did where all he did the entire stream was watch all the Warcraft 3 cinematics. There's a video up on YouTube that like cuts all the Warcraft 3 cinematics and cutscenes together to like make a movie essentially, and it's like 4 to 7 hours long, something pretty ridiculously long. And I remember there was a stream that Hotshot did where he started watching it, and that's like all we did during the stream was all the viewers would watch the Warcraft 3 cinematic, and he wouldn't really commentate on it much, but it was just kind of like watching a movie with a bunch of different people around. And there was one point where Hotshot had to like go to the grocery store or something, so he left the stream on with everyone still able to watch the cinematic. And I feel like cinematics are something that's interesting because they're always really hyped up, even though they're so unimportant in the grand scheme of things, you know? They're basically ads, especially the cinematics that are not representative of the gameplay whatsoever, the actual just animations, the animated cinematics. They are just lies about the game. They pretend that the game is something that it's not for the sake of promoting, you know, whatever it is, the promoting a new season in League of Legends, or typically they're done for promotion. And generally speaking, cinematics are very unimportant in the grand scheme of things, but they're also something that people freak out over a lot. They're seen as like this really cool, exciting thing to pay attention to. And there's been an interesting progression from like way back in the early 2000s. People were talking about how, whoa, the Warcraft 3 cinematics, the World of Warcraft cinematics, Blizzard should make a movie, the StarCraft cinematics or whatever. They're so cool. Blizzard should make a movie. Blizzard eventually did make a movie, and it was eh. But yeah, I've been around League of Legends for such a long period of time. It's been interesting to see how the cinematics have evolved over the years, where originally they looked pretty terrible, but they were kind of still exciting and hyped you up for a new season, hyped you up for whatever it was Riot was promoting. And Riot has gotten way better at making crazy cool cinematics that really get you hyped for a new champion release or a new whatever it is. And so, yeah, I'd actually like to maybe do a project that examines all the different League cinematics in some sort of format. Sean Bay asks, where do you see the League Esports scene in 5 years, with all the hype and general popularity of competitive League dying down compared to the massive buyouts of Sword Art and Perks? Where do you see the League Esports trajectory heading? Big fan of the channel. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much, Sean. So I think League Esports is definitely going to continue sustaining at least for 5 years. I don't know how it will go in terms of growth. Like, at a certain point, growth has to stop because there's a finite amount of people in the world, and there's a finite amount of people that will be sports fans, that will care about esports. And, at some point, growth will stop. I don't know if I would say that the general popularity for competitive League of Legends is dying down. I think that it's, to my knowledge, as popular as ever, especially in the Eastern Hemisphere, in China and Korea and Taiwan and all sorts of Eastern nations. League seems to be as popular and successful as ever. In the West, I don't know if it's dying down in North America. There's a lot of NA fans that are sick of NA teams being run the way that they have been. In Europe, maybe there's a bit of a decline in viewership now that, they're seemingly not as strong. G2 isn't quite as strong or close to winning Worlds as they were in 2019. But I feel like esports is still as popular as ever, and it's probably going to continue at least sustaining its level of popularity for a period of time, if not continuing to grow. What you might be describing a little bit with Sword Art and Perks getting big contracts and buyouts and stuff compared to the level of viewership or whatever that currently exists. I think that there is a bit of a disconnect there, maybe just because of how business works right now. Right now, in terms of like the world of business and the world of finance and investing, there's a lot of hype in terms of investments. You don't actually have to be a profitable business to have a crazy valuation. Like DoorDash has never made money before. Uber has never turned a profit before. Tesla doesn't sell nearly as many cars as Ford or any other manufacturer. But these are incredibly valuable companies that are valued super highly because of the potential that they have in the future. And I think that's kind of how esports is being treated in the world of business at the moment. Esports teams most of them are not profitable. Most of them do not turn a profit or make money, but the potential for esports to become the next big thing in terms of, becoming like a mainstream sport, I think the potential is definitely still there. And depending on how things pan out, there's still a hugely bright future ahead. I would say that esports still has a very bright future. It could falter. Looking 5 years into the future, like your question suggests, is difficult because it's totally dependent on the decisions teams make, the decisions that Riot makes, and how things progress. Because there are problems. Honestly, I could make a whole video talking about this, and I might take a while to answer this question. There's a lot of problems that exist in esports right now that teams in Riot have to tackle. There's a huge problem in terms of the fact that players, people are not fans of teams, they're fans of players. That is a death sentence for a sport. For a sport to succeed, really, it comes off the backs of people being fans of teams. For a sport or a sports league to be profitable and successful, that's a really important part of it. It's also the most valuable part. People will become lifelong fans of Manchester United or Tottenham or the Green Bay Packers or the New York Mets, even though these teams are just kind of a business. People don't become a lifelong fan of Target, where they buy Target merch and talk about how much they're a big Target fan because, oh my God, Target is the best business ever. Sports are kind of in a weird world where they are run as businesses, but they get this weird sort of fan loyalty. And there's not loyalty to teams right now in esports. There's just kind of loyalty to players, and players will come and go. And so I'm a little bit worried about how teams in Riot are going to tackle the problem that there are not fans of teams as much as there are fans of individual players out there at the moment. And there's a lot of other problems like that exist that, again, I could go on talking about forever. So it totally depends on how teams approach these issues and whether they can successfully overcome them or not. If they can overcome them, then I see no reason to believe that esports will not continue being a massive thing for decades to come. And specifically League of Legends, I think League can totally survive. There are some esports out there like StarCraft that will naturally die just because the developer doesn't care about them. Like Blizzard did not care about sustaining StarCraft Brood War as an esport for decades. They were like, screw it, we'll make StarCraft 2 because we're a company that's just trying to make a profit off of repeatedly making video games. And if StarCraft 2 kills the Brood War competitive scene and doesn't succeed as an esport itself, we don't care. There are esports that will naturally die for those sorts of reasons. Melee and Super Smash Brothers is another one that struggles because the developer doesn't care at all about its competitive scene. But I think that League of Legends has the best shot of anything to become a massive sport, to have more mainstream success because of the fact that Riot seems to actually care about making esports a long-lasting thing that can survive for decades, if not like hundreds of years, which sounds crazy, but we have no idea how the future is going to go. So yeah, that's kind of my opinion on that. I think there's a bright future ahead, and all teams in Riot need to do are make sure that they tackle the problems that they are facing right now. Understand that there are problems that exist and they have to tackle them, but assuming they do so and don't completely botch it, esports should be around, and League especially should be around for a long period of time, in my opinion. Damn Good T asks, what, in your opinion, are the current League esports storylines / events which are interesting enough to do a documentary on? So this is actually something that's an interesting question, because I don't necessarily want to reveal future video projects, but I'll say this. The LCK and the LPL are the two most interesting leagues in the world for a multitude of reasons. NA, has its storylines and has things worth following. I specifically feel like NA has a huge opportunity to build up the storylines of the next generation of players now that we have the Doublelifts and the Bjergsens and the kind of first generation retiring. There's a huge amount of potential for storylines in terms of the next generation of players that are coming up to replace them. In Europe as well, there's a lot of great storylines for, EU has gotten very close to winning a Worlds a couple of years in a row now, and they definitely have some interesting storylines with Mad Lions and Rogue becoming these teams that are able to challenge the G2s and Fnatic who've won every single split except for one the entire history of the EU LCS. So there are interesting storylines there, and I don't mean to diminish those necessarily. But with the esports culture that exists in China and Korea, and with the amount of parity that exists, I can't help but feel like those are the most interesting leagues in the world. It used to be, for a long period of time, from like 2013 to 2016 or 17, that you had 1 to 2 good regions, or one to two good teams that existed that were clearly the best. You know, like SK Telecom was so good for so many individual seasons of Korean LCK play that it's almost easy to pass over the Rocks Tigers or KT Rolster or a number of other teams and say, like, you know, oh, you know, they were cool, but they weren't as great or interesting as SK Telecom. Like Mad Life and CJ Entus, that might be a very cool team, but they weren't nearly as successful or interesting to follow compared to SKT. And similarly in China, RNG and Uzi were the big superstars of that region for such a long period of time that you almost forget about Positive Energy. Or, you know, like how many of you even know the name Positive Energy? Do you know that team at all? Like, no, because RNG and Uzi were the face of China for the longest period of time. But right now, there are so many top tier players and so many different teams that have very competitive rosters with super high tier players that it's a really interesting series of leagues to follow. I don't know if I necessarily want to give you specific storylines or specific players or ideas that I currently have for videos, because I do have probably a number of different videos that will be coming out soon, and I don't necessarily want to spoil that, especially because this is a public Q&A. But yeah, there's a lot to dig into in those two regions, I will say that. All right, Jensen's Alt asks, what's the process that goes through making one of your videos on all your channels? Do some ideas come out of the blue, or is there a list of things that you have that you want to talk about? So the process is, yes, I have a number of different lists. I have like 4 different lists for 4 different channels that if I ever get an idea, I'll write it down there. Once I settle on making a video, the first thing that you have to do is do all the research imaginable. You know, I bookmark every resource or link, read any article, watch any games, or any sort of, you know, podcasts or whatever that are relevant that discuss a subject, especially if it's something that I'm not super familiar with myself. A lot of the videos that I've made in the past are things that the purpose of a documentary in my mind is to take an exciting moment or a relevant, interesting thing that has happened in history and give an audience who maybe wasn't necessarily there the same level of excitement or thrills or depression or whatever it is of that moment, right? So if Season 2 Worlds was the most exciting thing of all time and you weren't around there to experience it, I want to make a TPA documentary that gives you the same level of excitement that it felt to witness that live. And a lot of the videos I've made in the past, like the TPA one, like the Dignitas one, like the Ocelot one, those are all storylines that I kind of lived through as a fan. I experienced those as a fan back then myself, so I felt as though I didn't necessarily maybe have to do as much research to like learn about Althor or learn about Ocelot's early days on SK because I got to experience that myself and I was pretty well aware of the story. But the first thing that you have to do when it comes to making one of those videos, do all the research imaginable, and then outline. Outlining is a really important part of making sure that you have a good, like, you know, storyboard essentially, and that each point is placed in the right spot. There's an interesting sort of rule from I don't know if Matt Parker and Trey Stone were the ones that originally made it up. I don't think they were, but I learned it from them. When it comes to making any sort of story, one of the most important things to do is make sure that you don't have 2 points connected by and then. You can't say, you know, this happened and then that happened. You have to use therefore or but. You have to say this happened, therefore that happened, but that happened, and like having that sort of interconnected part of a script and of an outline is really important. And generally speaking, that's where I spend most of my time. I spend most of my time on the research, on the writing, on the scripting, all that kind of stuff. The editing, I don't spend as much time on because I don't really like doing myself and I don't really care about as much. Recently, I feel like YouTube has taken a direction where a lot of channels are succeeding by having very flashy editing without as good substance, which I've talked about in previous videos on this channel, which is just, again, in general. I'm not really talking about anyone in the League scene because I don't really watch that much League content these days, but there's a lot of channels out there that can substitute poor substance for really good editing and flashy visuals to keep you around through the bad substance. And I've never really liked that. I've always kind of wanted it to be the other way around. And, people like John Boy's Summoning Salt, those kinds of guys are the ones that I would say are my quote unquote inspirations, if you want to use that word. And so that's where I spend most of my time. And even if it's something as silly as this, a Q&A video for patrons on my second channel, or, whatever other weird personal project, I spend most of the time making sure a video or a story has really good structure, a really good base sort of substance to build upon. And then, I might skimp a little bit on the editing or on the visuals, because I don't really care about that kind of stuff as much and don't have as much fun working on that part of a video. But that's sort of the process that goes through that goes through creating any sort of video. I have a huge list of ideas that I'll spend a lot of time working with the idea, with the outlining, with the scripting, and then it's just powering through the boringness that is editing to actually get it out to you guys. Jorge Valdez asks, have you ever considered speaking on philosophy without bringing it back to League? Your takes and views have always been interesting, though League has been something that I, and maybe your longtime viewers, have grown out of, something like the Art of War series. So I have been interested in making a lot of videos that are not related to League of Legends at all, but I have a bit of an issue in that I don't feel like I can because of YouTube. The YouTube algorithm is what determines whether I have a career or not. And because of that, I really have to play to it in many ways. And I think just not making videos or making videos about not League of Legends subjects and posting them on my primarily League of Legends YouTube channel is a bad idea. Because of that, I don't know if... I don't know. There are some projects that I want to do that I kind of want to work on, and I don't know what I'm going to do with them. I don't know if I'm going to put them up here on GBay 100. I don't know if I'm going to put them on an entirely new channel, or if I'm going to put them on the GBay 99 page. But there are a few videos that I have been kicking around, because one of my favorite things to do is... learn about new things through the lens of history. That's kind of what my video that I did recently on the culture difference video between the Eastern Hemisphere of the world and the Western Hemisphere, that talks about how Confucianism and Buddhism kind of influenced Eastern culture today, Sociology 101. That video was kind of, my attempt at dipping my toes into doing that kind of stuff, where the League of Legends part was as unimportant as possible, and the meat of the video was really supposed to be, learning about the history and culture of a different area of the world. And a lot of people didn't seem to get it, or didn't seem to understand it, or misconstrued or misinterpreted what I was saying. So that kind of scared me from doing anything that's, too philosophy or history based anyway, because there are some important and fun subjects to learn about, but they're also important that you get the right idea across. And if you misconstrue the message or don't explain it in a good way or something like that, then it can be a bit of an issue. And I don't want to, I feel like giving no information is better than giving bad information in some circumstances, and I don't want to be a source of misinformation or anything. So all of this long-winded rambling to say that I have considered making a number of different videos about a variety of subjects that are not League related, but the YouTube algorithm prevents me from putting them on the GBay 99 channel, essentially. And some of the more serious or educational subjects are things that I want to be careful about. If I do make a video that touches on them, I want to make sure that everybody understands what it is, because I don't want to give out bad information or have people misunderstand the message or point. So, yeah. Hope that answered your question. And finally, Def Cat, who of course did the music for one of our videos recently, asked, now that we have lost teams in League that are just friends that played League together and players are now more so property, how is this affecting the ability of teams to work together? I don't know if I would say players are property, although I understand what you're saying. I think that this is something that any sort of sport or really anything has to go through. Going from a level of amateurism to professionalism is a big step, but it's one that if you want to see, wider audiences, more success, greener pastures, whatever, you have to take that step. I've talked in the past on this YouTube channel about how I miss the early days of the internet, how I miss the early days of YouTube, the early days of gaming, where things were much more simple and about the fun of the thing rather than about professional, big blockbuster stuff. And esports has definitely gone through that same sort of transition. I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing, though. You know, it is something that I will miss. I'll miss the early days of CLG, the early days of TSM, of Cloud9, of Fnatic, SK Gaming. And yeah, it's something that is a bit sad because it's probably never going to really be coming back. But I think the world of professional sports is something that's just as interesting and just as fun as a nostalgic waning for the early days of something like that. I don't know if it's actually going to affect the ability of teams to work together at all. I know there are some really good legendary rosters in the early history of League that were like famously good at getting along with each other. You know, early C9, early CLG EU, I think are probably examples of that. But there were examples of teams that were notorious for not getting along well together in game, and that affected an ability's teamwork, like early CLG, CLG-NA, and early SK Gaming with Wicked and Ocelot on it. It's an interesting thing. I don't know if it affects abilities teams to work together or anything any more than early days of League did, but I do kind of miss that friends just playing together that happen to be pros mentality. But it is probably gone and probably isn't ever going to come back, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. The professionalism of pro sports is a really fun and interesting ecosystem to sink your teeth into that's just as interesting and fun as some of those early storylines. Anyway, though, that will do it for this Q&A video. Thank you very much to anyone who asked a question, and thank you to everyone who pledged to me on Patreon. Once again, I will take as many questions as you guys want. Please, patrons, ask me questions because I want to do more of these Q&A videos, but thank you very much, anyone who's supported me, and I will see you guys in the next Q&A and the next video soon.